All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Welcome to CCA Live. We understand that you might be zoomed out, and we're grateful that you've decided to spend an hour with us today. My name is Melanie Harris, and I'm a strategy director for Complete College America. Each of our CCA Live sessions features experts who will be providing us with valuable insight and information as we continue to navigate these unprecedented times. I encourage you to bookmark our CCA Live website to check out past sessions featuring candid conversations with Complete College America President Dr. Yolanda Watson-Spiva and leaders from a variety of organizations, including Excellencia, NACADA, and NIPSI, and past webinars with ACRO, accreditors across the nation, and other higher education leaders. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our 8-week calendar series featuring the outstanding work done at Waukesha County Technical College in Wisconsin. This 3-part series features blog posts and accompanying webinars. Hopefully you were able to attend or watch the recording of part 1 of Getting Ready to Serve Today's Students and share it with your colleagues. I'll add the link in the chat box for you to read Nicole and Brad's latest blog and the link to check out the recording. I encourage you to send questions via the Q&A box and chat with other attendees in the chat box, and we've built in time towards the end of the webinar to answer your questions. I'm excited to introduce our 2 panelists, Dr. Brad Piazza and Nicole Gahagan. Dr. Brad Piazza has dedicated 23 years of his professional career to helping students reach their academic and career goals through higher education. He currently serves as the Vice President of Learning for Waukesha County Technical College in Wisconsin. Prior to this position, he served 9 years as Dean of the School of Business at Waukesha County Technical College. In his current role, Brad serves as the Chief Academic Officer and as the co-lead for the implementation of guided pathways and an 8-week year-round academic calendar. Before joining WCTC, he served for 11 years as Assistant Dean of the School of Business at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. Brad believes that every student should have the opportunity to complete a credential in a timely manner and that the college has the responsibility of ensuring that it's possible. He believes that the work he does in higher education changes lives for the current generation, but also the generations to come. Nicole Gahagan is a high-performing, solutions-oriented student success strategist committed to equity in higher education, currently serving as a student support consultant at Mount Mary University. Skilled at developing relationships and building motivation among stakeholder groups to accelerate change and produce meaningful outcomes, she has achieved early success in transforming institutions. Nicole has extensive experience in team training and project management and has a proven record of identifying systemic issues and responding with well-executed action plans for continuous improvement. Nicole has successfully positioned institutions to enhance the success rates of traditionally at-risk students. Her favorite work involves collaboratively leading and managing institutional projects, including implementing guided pathways, developing a campus-wide assessment model, building a student success framework, and transitioning to a new academic calendar structure. We're excited to continue this series, especially in light of the adjustments we've all had to make during the COVID era and how they've integrated CCA's game changer strategies, such as 15 to finish, momentum year, and co-requisite support, and others into their work. I'm excited to turn it over to Brad and Nicole, and we'll be back for the Q&A portion and to wrap us up at the end.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Like Melanie said, my name is Nicole Gahagan. I am currently a student support consultant at Mount Mary University. That is a 4-year private institution in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Prior to this, though, for about 5.5 years, I served as a vice president for student services at Waukesha County Technical College and was Brad's partner in the really transformational work that we did to both implement guided pathways and then also change the academic calendar structure to meet the needs of our students. Brad, if you could go to the next slide.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. So just as a reminder, this is the second part of a 3-part blog and webinar series. If you were able to join us for the first webinar or watch the recording or read the first blog, you know that we suggested asking yourselves, your institution, 3 simple but often overlooked questions. Those questions are, who are our students? How do those students perform at our institution? And knowing these things, how would we design an institution, if we could start from scratch, to meet our students' needs? Our process to getting to where we are today wasn't as clean as those 3 questions, but we suggest that you do the work in earnest to answer those questions for yourselves, to probably save you a bit of time, because as we'll share today, as we shared a bit last week, or last 2 weeks ago, and then we'll share again in our 3rd part in 2 weeks from now, this has been a process. This has been a journey. It's taken us about 3 or 4 years to get here. And we'll give you some of those details of that journey coming up. The 3rd part of this theory is where we get into the nuts and the bolts of the academic calendar itself. And so if you are interested or maybe on the cusp of changing your academic calendar to one that has shorter terms, that one's definitely for you. But first, we're spending a lot of time on these first 2 parts of the series because it's really important. You can't just throw strategies at your institution and expect them to stick without starting with your culture first and transitioning your culture and transforming your culture to one that is student ready. I think the saying goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, in my opinion. And so we spent a number of years to really get ourselves ready and then get our institutions ready for some significant changes that impacted every single process at our institution. So if you've ever seen a building be built, you know that the initial work takes up the majority of the time, and then all of a sudden, poof, the building seems to be there. But there's a lot of excavating and preparing the soil and setting the foundation and inserting the structures before really designing the rest of the building around those parts. And you know, that's really precisely what we did. We spent a lot of time kind of building that foundation and building the structures and supports so that our institution was ready to take our direction. So we're going to walk you through that journey a bit today. The next slide is going to show you, remind you what our academic calendar model currently looks like. We launched that this fall semester. What you'll see is that within a 17-week standard term, we have a 17-week standard semester. We have 2 8-week terms with a 1-week break in between. So our fall semester is broken down into fall 1, that's 8 weeks, and then there's a week break in between, and then fall 2. You'll see here that we have a winterim that is a really short, about a 4-week time period. And then we have our traditional spring semester that again is broken up into 2 terms, 2 8-week terms with a break in between, which is our spring break. Then we have our spring interim, and then we have a summer term as well. It's really the summer term, the 2 fall terms, and the 2 spring terms that are kind of the crux of our academic calendar structure. It's where the majority of our students are enrolling in their courses. So we have 5 8-week terms, and potential starts at all 5 of those points. That's really important because for some of our programs, there used to only be 1 start. You could only start in, say, the fall semester. And our fall semester started in August. So if you got laid off from your job the 2nd week of September, you were out of luck, because if you wanted a specific program that might just start in the fall semester, you would have to wait almost an entire year. And that wasn't really suitable for the type of students that we served. In addition to 5 8-week terms as a feature for this calendar model, we also feature year-round attendance as well. Really giving students the summer off wasn't actually something they wanted when we asked them. Many of our students are working adults and they want to get in, earn their credential, and move on. So while we used to just offer a few kind of general education courses during the summer, now we're starting to put a lot of our program courses into the summer as well. And at each of those 5 potential starts, we're making it so that students can jump into the proper sequence as well. So one of the reasons, or the primary reason, that we changed to this academic model is because it is more suitable for our students. About 85% of our students were enrolling part-time, like we shared with you 2 weeks ago. The majority of our students fall between the age range of 25 and 34 years old, and 75% of them work as well. This led to them having the ability to only take 6 credits per term. So if 5 years of going to school went perfectly, then they'd finally be able to graduate with their associate's degree. But of course, when you're 25 to 34 years old and you're working and you have a family, etc., having a 5-year span of time where life doesn't interrupt your ability to earn your credential, it's pretty unlikely for our students, and hence our need to change. So like I mentioned, we're going to share with you our journey. Our journey is really built off of the Guided Pathways framework, exemplar models in the nation that we studied and spoke to. It's also built off of a response to both national data and local data related to student success and college completion. And everything that we've done has been undergirded by just sheer passion for student success. Not just passion on the part of Brad and I, but the dozens and dozens and dozens of faculty and staff members who really helped us pull this off. So there's really no cookie cutter way to do this work. All we can do is share with you our story. You really can't consider anything that we've done a best practice, because in my opinion, a best practice is only the one that works for your institution. But we hope that you'll find some helpful hints or some kind of moments of inspiration in our story to help kind of build a structure that is right for your students on your campus.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Brad Piazza, Vice President of Learning at WCTC, and nice to be able to share our story with you again in the second of our 3 webinars. I wanted to mention that this is the 8th week of our first term. So we're wrapping up term 1 of our implementation this week, and we'll move into our fall break next week. So we all have our fingers crossed that the first 8 weeks shows the success that we expect we expect, and are happy to be able to say that we launched and that we're going to be moving into our second term of our fall semester. So today, as Nicole mentioned, we're going to continue to share our story a little bit and kind of go through the timeline of the work that we've done. And as Nicole also mentioned, this work has been going on for a number of years. In fact, it started back in the 2016-17 academic year with what we had planned on being a flexible year-round calendar. And a team had been put together, a cross-functional team from across the college that the Vice President of Human Resources and I were kind of co-championing, I think that's a word, and really to look at whether or not we could deliver programs year-round. Now, we weren't at that time thinking about 8-week terms. We were just thinking about the way that we could move our students through the institution a little bit more efficiently and get them to their end goal quicker. And so, and this has been a funny story internally, and Nicole will probably start laughing here at some point, and I know we have some colleagues who will probably remember this day, some colleagues on this webinar. We have at our institution what we call college communication meetings, and those meetings happen once a month, and there's different topics that we present on to share with the college community. And I remember this like it was yesterday, standing up in front of the college talking about what I thought was an absolutely brilliant idea of having students be able to start courses pretty much whenever they wanted. Programs could set up their own delivery models and points of entry, and it was just going to be the most flexible thing in the world for our students to get through And I was so excited, like I had everybody at the edge of their seats and I was feeling great. And at the end of that meeting, their director of institutional research walks up to me white as a ghost and says, "We need to talk." And I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to talk about how great this is going to be." And he said, "Nope, we can't do this." And I'm like, "Oh." And started to learn very quickly that my whole Wild West approach, and when everyone walks around every time they see me and starts doing this, right, the Wild West, and talking about how my vision, as intriguing as it might have been, would have put us in probably every federal financial aid violation that there is in terms of being able to successfully award students financial aid. We wouldn't have been able to do any reporting that all of us have to do as an institution. Students wouldn't have understand whether they were coming or going half the time, whatever the case may be. And so the idea that I had maybe didn't work quite as much as we had hoped, but it started to get us thinking about doing something different, and started to springboard some of the work that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to go through then to 2000, I believe it was 2017, and WCTC is part of a system, the Wisconsin Technical College system. We are a unique technical college system within our state, which is a little bit uncommon as you move across the country. And in that summer, the state office called a convening of a student success summit, and invited all 16 technical colleges to send representatives, I think teams of up to 5, to this convening about student success, and the idea that we could create student success centers. And when we say centers, I don't want you to think of like a bricks and mortar type of office, but really a concept of how we can better serve our students at each of our institutions. And so we went to this 2-day summit really not knowing what it was, but left there super intrigued. And to make a 2 days really boil it down into 2 words, it was guided pathways. And so the system office was working with the Jobs for the Future and the Community College Research Center and other organizations, and being able to provide resources for institutions within the state of Wisconsin to start within the technical college system within Wisconsin, to be able to start working through the implementation, if they so desired, of a guided pathways model. And so there was a significant grant awarded to the system office which was then distributed out to colleges based on the types of work that we wanted to do, to really have us start thinking about guided pathways. And many of you on here might be familiar with guided pathways, but really to explain it in probably the simplest terms, it looks at that whole student life cycle, from really the point of being a prospective student all the way through completion and everything that happens to them through their experience at your institution. And so the 5 of us that went left there knowing we had to do this. And when I say this, we weren't sure what the this was exactly, nor how we were going to do it. We were, however, all intrigued by the opportunity to do something different, to move our students through our colleges, and to really start thinking about success, and being able to say that we are doing the absolute best that we can as a college, as WCTC, to serve our students and get them from point A to point B in the most efficient but also successful manner. So after that summit, so we're still in that 2017-18 year, we came back and we had talked a lot about guided pathways and learned as much as we could from different publications that were out there from various organizations about what we can do to start building this framework. And for those of you who aren't familiar with guided pathways, really don't think of this, it's really useful to not think of this as an initiative, because it will probably die on the vine, but rather to think about it as a framework or an umbrella under which the rest of your work as an institution should fall. And the reason we're spending some time today on talking about guided pathways is because this is the framework under which our academic calendar resides. And so the calendar is the work, the pathways is really the umbrella under which this falls. So we created these domain teams. And so there's 4 domains within the guided pathways. And you can see on the screen what they are. I'm not going to read them to you, but really, you know, domain 1 has to do with providing opportunities for students to get on a path. Domain 2 makes sure that they are on the right path. And the easiest example I can give you, like everybody, you know, you come into college, you come into our college and you want to be a nurse because your mom or dad is a nurse and works in healthcare, and then but the problem is you faint every time you see blood. Well, nursing might not be the best option for you. It would be really nice to identify that early in that student's academic career, like before they start taking classes, because every time they're taking a class that ultimately is not going to count towards the program that they end up choosing, they're wasting time, they're wasting money, opportunity costs, and so on. So Domain 2 really helps make sure that they're really getting into that area that they should be going based on their interests and skill levels and so on. Domain 3 is about how do we keep them on the path. So we have our students in our programs and in our institutions. Our goal is to keep them moving forward. And so how do we do that? And then Domain 4, of course, is how do you know that they know what they're supposed to know, and how are you assessing that type of activity throughout their journey? So we set up 4 domain teams, and Nicole and I spent a lot of time on this, and we chartered each team so they knew exactly what they needed to do, what their goals were, what their timeline was, what their team wasn't responsible for, and also selected individuals. And so this continued our work of moving the institution towards something else and providing input from across the institution. We had probably 40 plus people across these domain teams from various areas of the institution to help move the institution again towards something different. And so now I'm going to transition back to Nicole to talk about the following year and where our calendar work really started to begin in earnest.
Thanks. So as Brett mentioned, we spent about a year kind of learning more about guided pathways and then helping our institution come to understand this concept and this framework as well. And the guided pathways core team and domain team spent a lot of time performing discovery, seeing how our practices were impacting student success throughout the student life experience. And we were learning a lot about ourselves. And it didn't always paint the prettiest picture, unfortunately. But what it did do is help us to understand that not only can we do better, but we must do better for our students in order to meet our mission as an institution. And so the data analysis really started with our guided pathways implementation work so that we could help sell the why to the rest of our institution. We showed them our own internal data to help them understand course success rates, retention, completion, and so on. So like Brad said, like we knew we had to do something. We weren't quite sure what yet at this point, but you could kind of get the feeling that something else was coming. So we started to do additional research. We took a look at national completion research, different models of academic calendars as well. And then we also started to communicate some of our findings too. So on the next slide, we'll give you a couple snapshots of some of the national data that we shared with our institution. You could see that we have information from Complete College America, EAB, Completion by Design. We really dove deep into understanding what the national conversation was about this so that we can bring it home to our state and then also to our district as well in Waukesha County. So what we wanted to do was to first help our institution understand the big picture, like what's going on with today's college students, why might that be? And then, like I said, ultimately to bring that home to WCTC's picture and what that might mean for us. When we looked at Complete College America's infographic here, of course, we concentrated on that second stopwatch and noted that nationally only 5% of associate degree seeking students were graduating on time. And while our rates were a bit better than that for our part-time students, which is the majority of our students, that was not the case. It was closer to this 5%. Then if you take a look at the lower left at EAB's chart here, we took a look at that third bar chart and really focused our institution's attention on that, helping them to understand the fate of a student who enrolls exclusively part-time, which was the case, like I said, of the majority of the students at our institution. You can see that almost 3/4 of those students were no longer enrolled. And once we get to our institutional data, you will see that our part-time students kind of paralleled the success rates of the nation's part-time students in comparison to their full-time counterparts. And then over on the right, this is completion by designs infographic. And we have both certificates and associate degrees and technical diplomas at our institution. And we were worried by the amount of excessive credits our students were taking. And a lot of times it wasn't just for the love of learning, unfortunately. It was because they were making mistakes in their course selection because the information we provided them in terms of their pathway wasn't clear to them. Or, as Brad mentioned, our students would come in thinking that they wanted to pursue a specific program for a specific career, but then pretty quickly realized that it wasn't right for them, but spent 16 weeks or more sitting in those courses without it ultimately being meaningful to them and ultimately the degree that they wanted to achieve. So on the next slide here, we started to hone in on what this thing that was coming might be. We're like, okay, this national data is really intriguing, probably even concerning, but like, so what? Like, what can we really do? We can't change our students, right? But we can do something to change us, though. That was the piece that was in control. As an open institution, an open access institution, we couldn't change the input, but we could change the process in order to change the output. But how are we going to do this? So we started to look at some exemplar models, some other institutions who have successfully converted their academic calendar to one that is more suitable for today's students or students like ours. We first heard of Trident Technical College. We read about them in the national research. Eventually, in a slide or two, you'll hear about how we got to see them in person at some conferences as well. So we really started to study them. This is EAB's feature of them. So at WCTC, we had for forever, up until this year, 2 16-week semesters. Like I mentioned earlier, a smattering of courses offered in the summer. And primarily all of our courses were taught in person. And given our student profile, we were really asking a lot of our students to kind of conform to our outdated box. So in a 16-week semester, there's a lot of opportunity for life to happen. And if life happens in week 12 of a 16-week semester and a student must stop out, they end up with 0 credits. And that is heartbreaking for the amount of time, money, energy, etc. they spent trying to pursue their education. But what we were intrigued by was Trident Technical College's more shorter terms. They called them compressed terms. They had 2 7-week terms with a week in between on week 8. And so what this infographic here demonstrates is that if students took 6 credits in the first term, the first fall term, and then attempted 6 credits in the second fall term, but that same life happened in that same week 12, they at least ended up with 6 credits because they successfully earned those in the first term. And when we took a look at our own course withdrawals, the majority of them were skewed towards the later half of the semester. So we knew that there was something going on there, and we wanted to investigate further and consider shorter terms at our own institution. So the next slide will show you Trident Technical College's results after they changed their academic calendar. So we saw them at either AACC or Achieving the Dream or some sort of national conference. Brad and I happened to go to the same session that was presented by, I think, their director of institutional research and maybe their dean of student success. Trident Technical College changed their academic calendar in 2014. And if you look at the chart over on the left, which represents successful course completion, you can see that nobody loses as a result of this change. You can see that for different kind of disaggregated groups, when you compare 2017 to 2012, everybody's course success increased by a certain percentage. Again, nobody lost in this scenario. And then if you look at the chart over on the right, this shows their iPads 150% graduation rates. You can see that their 2014 cohort graduation rate jumped by 5 points, and that in a year compared to the 2013 cohort, and that seems almost impossible to do. Ever since we saw them at this conference, Trident has been amazingly helpful. They might not want me to say that because I'm sure they get bombarded with requests for information, but we've had a few conversations with them, and they gave us a lot of really, really helpful hints and secrets to success for pulling this off. So one other college that we studied was Amarillo. Again, this is EAB's infographic. So as part of wanting to increase student success, we also wanted to align our academic calendar with national ideals for timely completion, such as Complete Colleges America's 15 to finish ideal. So 15 credits per 16-week semester, that model we used to have, really wasn't going to be possible for our students, 45% of whom worked full-time. So the issue really was our structure. And so we asked ourselves, how else might we help students earn 30 credits in an academic year? Currently, or at the time, only between 5 and 6% of all of our students were completing 30 credits in an academic year. So we were way off the mark in terms of what our target would be with that. So like I said, one of the institutions that we took a look at was Amarillo's College. And what we really liked about Amarillo was how they were intentionally incorporating summer as not an optional term anymore, but something that was going to be part of your program, part of your academic map, something you should assume you are going to take part in. You can see that 97% of the students who took 24 credits per year, at least at their institution, were completed, and that is an amazing completion rate and certainly something we strive for as well. So I mentioned that we started to kind of filter this down to our institutional data. And if you're thinking about doing anything like this, you can talk about the research and the statistics and everything that is proven by the scholars of higher education, but until you show your own institutional data, nobody's going to believe you. And so that's what we started to do. We started to take a look at our own institutional data to understand how our students were performing. And like we mentioned during our last webinar, our part-time students were completing at much lower rates than our full-time students. And this is important, again, because 85% of our students enroll on a part-time basis. They're taking about 6 credits per 16-week semester. So as a college whose mission it is to provide accessible career and technical education, we had to ask ourselves, are we really okay with less than half of our part-time students, again, representing 85% of our student population, graduating in double the amount of time a 2-year degree is supposed to take? Of course, the answer was no, and we probably would have done something about it sooner had we been more forthcoming and transparent or even knowledgeable that this was occurring at our institution. Like I mentioned over on the right there, between 5 and 6% of our students kind of historically have been completing 30 credits in an academic year. And this is far too low if our goal is timely completion. So we knew that we already had some 8-week courses occurring in some programs at our institution. So we got curious and we're like, okay, what does the success rate look like and what do the withdrawal rates look like in these 8-week courses? So we have over 3,600 registrations in 8-week courses in the spring 2019 semester, which is what you're looking at right now. And as you can see, in terms of course success rates, students who were, or there was about a 10% higher percentage point of course success in 8-week courses than there is in 16-week courses, and about a 6% difference in terms of withdrawal rate as well. So we were able to demonstrate that even our own students, in fact, were being more successful when they enrolled in 8-week courses. So we're like, okay, there's something to this. Go to the next slide, please. So we were excited. We felt like we were really on to something. But now we're like, okay, now what? Like, we've been talking about guided pathways for a year. How are we gonna suddenly spring a change to the academic calendar on our institution, especially after the last Wild Wild West episode? We knew that we had to approach this a little bit differently. We wanted the result to be innovation and not insurgency. When you really boiled down everything we were doing, we realized all the arrows pointed in a single direction. Everything was about student success and the student experience that we wanted to create at WCTC. So if we were going to finally align the college's historically fragmented and sometimes incomplete efforts to holistically support our students, then we were going to make sure every decision we made measured up to the same standard. And so the guided pathways teams got to work on developing this student success mission. You can read it there. A couple things that I will say about it is that it took painstaking effort to get it exactly where we wanted. We wordsmith the heck out of this thing because we wanted to be really intentional with this message, because this became one of the 2 key components to our messaging strategy. We defined just about every word, so everybody knew exactly what we meant by empowered, by inclusive, by welcoming, by proactively engaged and equitably supported. This statement was well documented and was also repeated often. On the next slide, you'll see how we kind of distilled this down. This was really our end game for both guided pathways and the academic calendar. So when we were going to restart the academic calendar change effort, which was really, like Brad mentioned, the more kind of technical or logistical aspect of the transformational change we've been going through at WCTC, we wanted to avoid a kind of flavor of the day or like confusion. Like, I thought we were doing guided pathways, now we're doing this calendar. Like, yes, we're doing both of these things, and we're doing both of these things to get to this goal. We want all of our students, at least more of our students, to earn a credential in a timely manner. And one thing I'll say about this statement, you'll see some underlines here. There really should be an underline under earn as well. Because one of the things you're going to hear if you decide to do this and you just focus on timely completion is like, you're going to water down the curriculum. This is going to be a conveyor belt of degrees. Like, no, right? We still want to make sure that we're ensuring the same high quality of teaching and learning that we've always had at our institution. So Brad's going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the additional communication pieces that we shared with our community.
So one of the things that we may have mentioned in the first one, and if we didn't, I'll certainly mention it now, is that you cannot over communicate to your internal as well as external stakeholders. You can't, because this is such a huge, for us, this was a change that was transformational in how we were doing business. As we mentioned in our first webinar, our institution is almost 100 years old. And so this was really a change in our business, in how we operated as an institution, and really, for lack of a better word, our business model. And so this also included our students, because as you can imagine, students were getting all kinds of messages from all kinds of people about what is the 8-week calendar, how they're going to get through it, et cetera, et cetera. And so we created a pretty extensive communication process. I want to show you about a minute of our first video where we really laid out for our students. And I should tell you that if you go to our website, wctc.edu/8-week, you will get to the landing page for the 8-week calendar, and you'll see a series of videos out there. We started a drip campaign. About every other week, we created a new video along with an email that went out to students that had the video embedded in it, and to all of our faculty and staff, so that they knew what was going on. And Nicole and I and our steering team, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we're very diligent in controlling the message of this. And that was one of the biggest things we heard when we talked to Trident and some other institutions, is that you have to control the narrative. You have to control the message at the beginning, because it's really hard to change it if you aren't out in front of that. So I'm gonna share again the first minute of this. Hopefully it will work.
Hi, welcome to WCTC. We're glad you chose us for your educational goals. Nicole and I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to you about some changes you're going to be seeing with the academic calendar and the way that you're moving through your programs. WCTC is almost 100 years old. And in that century of time, we have been operating under a traditional academic calendar, which means we've run a 16-week semester in the fall and a 16-week semester in the spring, and a few summer courses. And also only allowing for really 2 points of entry for students to come into the institution, one in August and one in January. What we're moving to, starting in fall of 2020, is an 8-week delivery model, where we'll have 2 8-week terms in the fall, 2 8-week terms in the spring, and an 8-week term in the summer. What this means is that our course delivery will be primarily in 8 weeks. It also means that students will have an opportunity to enter the institution at 5 times during the academic year, rather than just 2.
So that video, again, is one of many. I'm sure by now it's probably gone viral. Y'all have probably seen it already, because it was put together so well. But and that was a nice, beautiful July day in Wisconsin with the snow in the background. Just kidding. It was probably November when we did that. But we used that video again as the launch of the work we were doing. And so everybody was clear on what it is we were trying to attempt at the institution. And again, that was a step in us controlling the narrative around this work. And so we also, in addition to all those videos and the email drip campaigns, created quite a bit of print material as well. So this one that we're showing you is just a quick visual of what a full-time student or a part-time student schedule, for lack of a better word, might look like under these 8-week terms. So the one on the left is a full-time, where a student can get to full-time by not taking 4 or 5 classes all at the same time. And the one on the other side, how a student can, if they want to remain part-time for whatever reason, that they can do that as well. And what's important to note here, if you remember in our a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the mode of credits being anywhere from 3 to 6 per semester. These were really set up kind of moving students through at the cadence that they were already demonstrating that they were doing at our institution. So in addition to those videos and our landing page and the printed materials, we did tabletop tents and promoting this and getting them to getting students to information sessions. We created course matrices for each program, so that students knew exactly what was going to be offered in which term, in what modality, whether it was day or night. And remember, this was all kind of pre-COVID, and COVID disrupted things a little bit. So we're in the process of updating those matrices and maps just a little bit for some programs that had to change to accommodate our current situation. We also, as we had mentioned, had done a series of we called it the Roadshow, right? Where we talked internally and externally to our K-12 partners, to our local chambers of commerce, to our board of directors and so on, other college communication meetings, instructional manager meetings and so on, to really keep bringing this consistent information. The other thing we did that was pretty cool is we created an 8-week email box where students, if they had questions, they could email 8week@wctc.edu. I think that was the address, with just their questions. And then we had somebody watching that and then kind of triaging out who should respond to that. And so students did take advantage of being able to engage, to get some of their specific questions answered. We also, on that landing page and up at the top again is the website address for it, created a frequently asked questions. And a lot of these questions came from students via academic advisors that would come back to the steering team and say, these are the things that students are asking us on a very consistent basis. And again, you have to remember, students are getting information from advisors. They're getting information from their faculty, they're getting information from other students, and so understandably very confused as to what is the accurate information. And so we were able to set up the FAQ page that's still in existence, and we've been modifying that a little bit as we continue to move through to be able to direct students to maybe getting some information a little bit easier and faster. So now let's move to 2019-20, and this is where things really started to hit home for programs. And when I say programs, I'm talking really on the learning side of the house in terms of the faculty piece of their work in the 8-week calendar. Up until this point, we have been doing a lot of work with our steering team, getting the college ready for this change, laying out our why, and now it's time to move it into the programs. And so the very first thing we did was ask each program to redo their program maps, so their academic maps. This links back, of course, to the Domain 1 work of the guided pathway. This was critical. And so our program maps in the past required students to be able to take 18 to 21 credits per semester to get out in quote unquote 2 years. And it's just not a realistic way for students to move through our institution and maybe many of yours as well. Again, remember 85% of our students were attending part-time and very part-time. And so we asked them to create program maps that clearly laid out for students how they're going to move through their program at the cadence that they have been demonstrating again over those years. When those maps were done, and we'll be able to show you in our next webinar, kind of the checklist of things that had to happen for programs to get through. When they thought they were done, and we gave them a deadline because we had to publish a new catalog and so on, I, along with the director of financial aid, went and met with every instructional manager and literally looked at every single program map at our institution to see, A, if it had 8-week courses in it, if faculty and staff really gave good thought about whether or not a course should be converted or why a course couldn't be converted, more importantly. And to make sure that what we had planned here was still going to be in alignment with students being able to get financial aid. Because the last thing we wanted to do was to put program maps together and tell students this is how you move through, but then for them to learn that they weren't eligible for financial aid, which would have been the case with the Wild West show back in 2016-17. So this was critical, and seriously, I along with that financial aid manager became really good friends through this process because we were connected at the hip for a series of weeks to get through every single associate degree, tech diploma, and any program that could be awarded financial aid. And we had to ask programs to go back and make a number of changes to get into compliance so that students would be able to get aid. And again, we asked for the realistic maps to move students through. And so we also started to engage in professional development. In our next webinar, you're going to hear about our faculty development team and the awesome work that they continue to do to get our faculty ready to teach in a different format. And then, of course, all the process changes that had to go along with this. So then we launched the calendar again 8 weeks ago. And so we've went through this. So I want to spend some time on how we structured this team. And so as we've mentioned, I think in our first webinar and certainly in our first blog, we created a first and second blog. We created a steering team, and that steering team was made up of individuals from across the institution that we knew wanted to be part of this, that believed in what we were doing, that saw the benefits of it, and that were going to help us move this forward. We're going to show you who made that up in a second. And then around that steering team circle are all the sub-teams that had to be created in order for us to pull this work off. So the steering team was made up of a number of individuals, and I shouldn't say was, it still is, and we still meet not as frequently, but made up of these positions right now, and they were critical to this work. And so this team at the beginning of this process met every single week for 2 hours to get through all of the work that we had ahead of us. We had 18 months to pull this off, which is, you know, a short period of time to do this type of change. And then in addition to those, so Nicole and I were the champions of this work. And then our Dean of Academic Foundations and General Studies, along with our registrar, led that team. So we met with them outside of the steering team to continue to create our agendas and lay out the work ahead of us. And so this team met every single week. And then we had to make sure that all the work of the steering teams was being brought back. And so we were communicating as frequently as possible. And so we had a member of the steering team who served as a liaison to each of these sub-teams so that communication was moving back and forth. And so we chartered that steering team, we meaning Nicole and I. We did not charter the sub-teams. We let them kind of figure out, we gave them each a definition. Nicole will go over a couple of them in a little bit, but really let them kind of design their own work with some parameters. And then again, that liaison was the conduit going back and forth between those. And then there were a couple times where we brought all the members of the sub-teams together to share their work, talk about what they're doing, and to really see where their work overlaps with other sub-teams. And so again, that communication, that synergy and alignment amongst all of these sub-teams was of critical importance as we move forward. So Nicole's going to highlight a couple of these sub-teams that we found to be of critical importance as we move through this process.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that all of those sub-teams are described briefly in the blog. So if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and check that out soon. It will give you an idea of all of kind of their work and the direction that we provided them. But we're going to highlight 4 fairly quickly here for you, 4 that we thought were really key to us to be able to pull this off in a relatively short amount of time. One of them was communication. We've talked a lot about communication, but ultimately what we wanted to make sure that we did was develop and quite frankly control some messaging and some communication strategies specific to what our ultimate goal was, to help more students earn a credential in a timely manner. And how we were going to do that, doing that through the change in the academic calendar. And so we developed a communication matrix about who needs to know what, when, and how we were going to communicate this with them. And that was inclusive of faculty and staff, students, our high school partners, our business and industry partners, community organizations, and so on. And also was inclusive of press releases, our institutional magazine, presentations, videos, web landing page, like you name it, we left no stone uncovered. We needed everybody to know about this because our mission is to serve our district. And so we needed to make sure everybody knew about this and that they were well informed so that if they were going to enroll, they can enroll. If they were on the employer side, they would understand kind of how students were experiencing their education at WCTC. You can see that we only have 4 people on this team. We kept that purposefully tight. Because we needed kind of rapid fire communication happening. And so we needed just some key decision makers around the table. And that was just Brad and I. And then Andy, who has some crazy title like Director of PR and Marketing and Community Relations or something like that. And then Web, Sue, who really controlled a lot of our web as well. And if you wanted anything to happen on the web, you needed Sue on your team. So she was on our team and was extremely helpful with making that look really user-friendly, kind of distilling really complex information into something that was easy to consume for faculty, staff, and students, as well as community members. The next team that we want to highlight is our enrollment services team. So this included financial aid, admissions, registration, and then also kind of the student-facing member of our financial accounting services, so the person who handled a lot of student billing and things. And ultimately, what they had to look at is adjusting their policies, procedures, practices, deadlines, all those things to coincide with an 8-week calendar, because of course the admission process is going to change, the financial aid census date and distribution process is going to change, registration, course scheduling, drop dates, grading, incompletes, all of those things had to change in order to pull this off. You'll see kind of that last half of their charge there was to also implement a standard coaching methodology. So like I mentioned, this isn't just about changing the academic calendar. All of your support structures that kind of facilitate the learning process at your institution have to change with it. And so we were training all levels of our student-facing personnel on student success coaching methodologies so that it seemed less transactional, and no matter where the student landed with a question, even if they were in the wrong place, we could start to uncover the root of the student's issue and make sure that we had some level of answer for them, and then also routed them to the expert too, so that they can get more in-depth answers to their questions. The third one is human resources. Really the primary importance of this was to help us kind of measure workload and compensation, and then change our faculty contracts. We changed our faculty contracts from 9 months to a year-round academic calendar contract. We also, though, wanted to make sure that student success was ingrained in not just the student experience, but also the employee experience too. So we looked to them for help with changing job descriptions and also onboarding processes and professional development opportunities to make sure that we are attracting and cultivating employees who are on board with student success from day one. And then lastly, perhaps most importantly, was our instructional design / faculty professional development sub-team. So this was essential because, again, the majority of our instruction was delivered in a 16-week semester face-to-face format. And we were asking them to change that significantly. So our faculty, we were asking a lot of our faculty, we were asking them to, number one, identify kind of what the best fit was in terms of course delivery for the content or the hands-on components of their course, and then to design their course for that particular delivery option, and then know how to teach and assess not only in the delivery option, but then also at an 8-week kind of clip. Right, and so these are big changes for our faculty members who were pretty used to a more kind of standard and traditional method of teaching and helping our students learn. So like we've referred to a number of times during this webinar, we are getting to more of the nuts and bolts or the logistics behind our 8-week calendar. And the great news is we're bringing friends too. We have invited 5 other individuals from our institution who have helped pull this off, who have really been the boots on the ground in terms of helping us change business practices, train faculty members, etc., so that we were able to launch this this fall. Like, even despite the disruptions that the national pandemic may have otherwise caused, we were ready, because we were already moving in that direction prior to this. So in addition, we're going to bring you some gifts too. We're going to have artifacts that maybe you can use as a sample, something that you can build off of if you're going to convert to shorter terms in a year-round academic calendar. Like Brad mentioned, we're going to bring forward the checklist for our program maps. We're going to bring a pre-planning form that our student accessibility office used with their students to help them understand how to prepare for learning in this new environment and so on. So you'll get some takeaways too in the next blog. So we definitely invite you to check out the blog where we'll have access to these artifacts, but then also join us for the webinar so you can hear from the experts themselves.
Thank you, Brad and Nicole. Please join us for part 3 of the webinar series. I've added the link into the chat box, and that's on October 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You will receive a quick evaluation in your email, and I'll also have the link to part 1 and part 2's blogs and the recordings of today's session. And then I also want to plug our With Equity and Justice for All virtual event that will be happening October 26th through October 30th. I encourage you to create a profile on our website in the top right corner to make sure you're receiving the latest information about that. Thank you again. Please let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.